Hey, do you know what time it is? That's right. It's time for Coach Lindy's podcast. The podcast to get you moving. Hi, I'm Lindy Hutchinson, a certified life mastery consultant with the Brave Thinking Institute. As a life coach, I help others transform their life as I have mine. It's not easy, but it is possible, and it most certainly is worth it. Each week, I'll share insights that inform, inspire, and ignite in you your desire to create a life that you love. So let's find out what's going on this week. Welcome to the podcast. As always, I was looking forward to being with you, and here we are. So if I was going to ask you, name a famous woman who changed the course of history, especially for women, what names would you say? What names come to mind? Let's see, Amelia Earhart, we've talked about Eleanor Roosevelt, we've talked about Helen Keller. What if I said to you Lucille Ball? Well, you have a certain age, that doesn't mean much for you unless you watch a lot of old reruns of the, namely, I Love Lucy show. But the fact is, Lucille Ball, who was known for being a comedian, actually was a very astute businesswoman. That's not how she started, but that's what she became. And she opened doors and laid down a lot of opportunities for many, many people, both men and women, but especially women, because she ended up becoming an executive and a business owner in Hollywood, which at the time was dominated mostly and only by men. Not that that's bad, but in terms of women having some opportunities, it was pretty non-existent for a while, long time. So let's talk about who was Lucille Ball. Now, you remember her as redhead, a pretty redhead, and all the goofy shenanigans that she got involved with on her show. Well, she was born in 1911 in New York, Jamestown, New York, to Henry and Desiree. They did not have much money, and later on, she would have a younger brother born. It was not an easy life. There was tragedy and there was no money. Her dad, Henry, moved around. He was an electrician and he was trying to find better work. So they moved from New York, where she was born, to Montana. And when things weren't going so great there, then they moved to Michigan. And then early on in 1915, when Lucille was only 3 years old, her dad died because of typhoid, which at the time was relatively common. So that was, of course, terrible, even though she was very young. Desiree, her mom, ended up moving her, Lucille and herself back to New York. She ended up meeting, her mom was pregnant with her younger brother. She ended up working in a factory, her mom did, and she met a new man who didn't like kids. Isn't that nice? So he moved Lucille's mom, Desiree, and himself to Detroit and left the little ones with each respective parent. And the next many years for Lucille Ball was without her brother or her mother or her dad and living with total strangers, and it apparently was not a very pleasant experience. Fortunately, at 11, her mom and stepdad did return to Jamestown. They had gone to Detroit, and the kids apparently moved in. They ended up all living together after that. Well, by the time she turned 15, she had big dreams, and she convinced her mom to enroll her in New York City Drama School, Unfortunately, that did not go well. She was too shy and she did not do well on stage, which is kind of funny if you consider what she ended up being later. But the good news was a few years later, and of course she blossomed into a beauty, she became a model. She changed her name. She became a model, and she started doing pretty well for herself. Not amazing, but at the time, for what the times were, and for what she was, which was not real educated and all that, she made a living. And in the early 1930s, she dyed her brown hair blonde and she headed to Hollywood. And she was very fortunate because she was able to work with some amazing people like Katharine Hepburn and Ginger Rogers. Again, for younger people, or if you don't know much of history in Hollywood, but those were big names. And she was in The Three Musketeers, A Stage Door, and she did a lot in a very short amount of time. Well, her life really took a turn ultimately for good in the 1940s when she met a man by the name of Desi Arnaz, and he was Cuban and he was a band leader. And they fell in love and they got married. Well, a lot of the people who knew the both of them thought the marriage wouldn't last a year for a few reasons, but part of it was that Lucille already had a reputation for being spunky, and then Desi was a ladies' man, which he was his entire life. Well, they actually ended up making it work for 20 years, and they also did some pretty amazing things in business. In 1942, she dyed her hair, Lucille Ball dyed her hair the signature red, which she became international, and of course that's who she'll always be. And they began, Desi Arnaz also he was very brilliant-minded, very talented, very brilliant-minded, and they ended up, I'm probably cutting out too many parts of this, but they ended up doing radio. Radio was really big. And they actually did a show called My Favorite Husband. Well, CBS liked it, and they wanted her to be a part of the show, but she said, if I'm coming, you're going to use my real life husband, who's also a performer, because he had a band, a very successful band. And they said, no, this was, at the time, if you'll excuse the expression, it was a very white world. And they said no, and they did not like his ethnicity. Well, they ended up having the last laugh because Desi and Lucy created this type of show about a couple and always getting into things. And they took it on the road. So they did live performances. It did really well. And so CBS came back and said, okay, we'll sign you and your Cuban husband. And then it looked like that was going really well. And they're setting it up. There was some squabbles about how to film it. So wisely, Lucille and Desi created their own company called Desilu Productions, and they filmed it. They bought the rights to the show, and they created the show, and that ended up making them very wealthy. And in 1951, the I Love Lucy show debuted. It was like nothing anyone at that time had seen before. What sitcom? Now we know, now it's all the time, but the sitcoms, that was really kind of the birth of that. Speaking of birth, during that time she became pregnant, and it was kind of funny because you couldn't use the word pregnant. There's a lot of words you couldn't use, and they even hid her pregnancy for quite a while. And it says that Lucille Ball, the way she acted, if you ever see the old reruns or maybe watched it when they first came out, it looked like everything was very ad-libbed, and they said, no, actually, she was quite the perfectionist, and she would rehearse, and she would rehearse, and she would rehearse, and she would rehearse. So all those facial expressions, all those noises, all that stuff that she did, she practiced and practiced and practiced. And there were many luminaries who cite Lucille Ball as their inspiration. Mary Tyler Moore, Penny Marshall, Sybil Shepherd, and even Robin Williams. There are many, many people who are greatly influenced by her expertise and her professionalism. Let's see, and for 4 of the 6 years that the I Love Lucy show ran, for 4 of the 6 years, they were the #1 show in the country, which means that they garnered 67.3%, which was crazy. Nobody was doing that, and yet she did. The show ended in 1957, but their Desilu Productions did not. They ended up doing very famous shows, again, if you know the history. Our Miss Brooks, Make Room for Daddy, The Dick Van Dyke Show, The Untouchables, Star Trek, and Mission Impossible. All those were huge, huge shows. She ended up, in 1960, she and Desi did divorce. She took over the Desilu Productions, and so she was the first woman to run a major television production studio. So she was paving the way for other women, and she made it look easy, and we are very most assured that it was not easy. She did sell eventually the studio in 1967 for $17 million, and I did not look up what that would be, but that would be a lot of money. So she ended up doing some other shows. She never quite recaptured the way I Love Lucy was. Of course, it was unusual. It was unique. And she received all kinds of awards: International Radio and Television Society's Gold Medal, 4 Emmys. She had the induction into the Television Hall of Fame and the Kennedy Center of Performing Arts for her lifetime work, her recognition for that. She passed away in April 26, 1989. And the whole world mourned the loss of the world's most favorite redhead. So, Lucille Ball, if you ever watch her or see, she did some movies, she was hilarious, but understand she was a very smart woman, very talented woman. She would not let herself be intimidated, and she went forward with her ideas, which is where you and I are at, and we will be doing the same things. So this week, our power word is Trailblazer. And the Train Your Brain thought is Lucille Ball, funny on screen, but serious businesswoman. And from our Hey, That's Funny file, why aren't dogs good dancers? Because they have 2 left feet. Okay, so I'm not going to have my own show, and now we know why. So have a great week, and remember to keep creating a life that you love because you deserve it. Take care until I see you again. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for joining me this week. I look forward to being with you every week. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, please email me at coachlindy@lindyhutchinson.com. My name is spelled L-Y-N-D-I, so it's Coach Lindy, L-Y-N-D-I, at Lindy Hutchinson, LYNDIHUTCHINSON.com. I value what your input is, and I'm always open up for suggestions and ideas. If you will like and or subscribe to this podcast, that would be wonderful. I appreciate it. And I enjoy anything that you might want to send in, or if you would like some more information about coaching, send me an email and I will get back with you, and we'll talk about how you can create your best life. Have a good week. We'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.